Comics are literature, at least when I write them. Hi, my name is Peter David. You're watching Sequentially Yours, and when I think of you, I touch myself.
On July 21st, Luc Besson's newest sci-fi epic, Valerian, the City of a Thousand Planets, will be released, and I cannot begin to describe how excited I am for this. I hadn't read the comics before seeing the film would be coming out, but having delved deep into them to do a longer video, I've absolutely fallen in love with these bande dessinées. That's what Franco-Belgian comics are called, and especially the main characters, Valerian and Laureline. However, I realize that I'm sadly in a small minority of Americans who have even heard of these characters and this fantastic set of stories getting ready to celebrate their 50th anniversary, with the last volume seeing publication as late as 2013. Not only that, but the whole time's had the same creative team, Pierre Christian and Jean-Claude Mézeray. Such a wide range of stories to draw from, where do you even start? It's that very question that all storytellers need to ask themselves, particularly when they're adapting a property with such a rich mythology. The most common place to start is with an origin story. We all have an origin, presumably at our birth, but we change and grow over time, so we become different people. The person that you were at 6 is not the person that you are today, which is not the person that you will be in 20 years. The origin story provides a narrative shorthand that allows us to see who a person is at a singular point in their lives, providing a baseline from which they can grow and change. For example, we have covered Batman's origin story over a dozen times on screen, directly 14 times in the comics, and even twice in the Arkham video game series. There are only 4 games in the series, and in fully half of them, we go over Batman's parents' deaths. Of the various franchises, only the Adam West version doesn't bother touching on the deaths of the Waynes at all. Sometimes, like in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the scene is entirely extraneous, but we've become so accustomed to this idea that it provides a valuable touchstone onto which we can build a character. In other words, we keep coming back to that origin story because that's when the character of Bruce Wayne becomes interesting. And it's easy to then do whatever we want with him from there, be it complex vigilante, stoic seeker of justice, sweaty CrossFit guy. You get the idea. Valerian in the comics, however, doesn't have an origin story. You don't learn about his family or his childhood. He doesn't have a specific reason for joining the Spatio-Temporal Agency other than a love for adventure and patriotism for Galaxity, the capital city of the Terran Empire. The first book is about him meeting and becoming partners with Laureline, which is admittedly the key relationship, but that story was considered so inconsequential that it wasn't collected into graphic novel format until 1983, 16 years after its initial publication in Pilot magazine and 10 graphic novels into its run. The movie isn't based on either that story or the first graphic novel, City of Shifting Water. It's clearly not necessary to start with an origin, but there are other options. Another good place to start the story is at the advent of a major shift in the world. Blade is a great example of this. The first act of the movie covers what Blade is and his origin, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the story except for a small, blinking you'll miss it beat in the third act that tries to tie Deacon Frost to Blade's creation. You probably forgot it was even there, didn't you? Instead, the film establishes a normal. Blade is a half-vampire that hunts full vampires that live in a rigidly structured society, then upends that normal by introducing Frost's plan to overthrow the vampire hierarchy, become a godlike being, and take over the world. Oh, and kill Udo Kier. Boo! Blade's arc is to go from struggling with his hunger and trying desperately to find a cure, to rejecting the cure and accepting that his hunger is worth it if he is able to use his powers for good. Deacon Frost's attempt to completely upend the vampire hierarchy, while ultimately a failure, is a success in the sense that it convinces Blade that the world needs him, that it is too dangerous without the Daywalker in it. In a galaxy and time-spanning world like Valerian and Laureline, though, it's hard to come by status quo upsetting events. Part of what makes science fiction and science fantasy so exciting as a genre is that nearly anything can plausibly happen with little explanation. The presence of a shapeshifter in the pilot of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, for example, was exciting because we had never seen a character quite like Odo before. But the existence of aliens that can change their shape doesn't seem any more outlandish than pure warrior societies or beings that have mastered their emotions or highly advanced androids that want to be human. Now, I'm not saying that you can't upset the status quo in a sci-fi property.
and we'll cover that when I go over Valerian and Laureline in another video, but it's significantly harder. Blade works because it was our world plus one element, vampires. Add naughty vampire gods, and things are getting too far away from what we expect. Sci-fi is already so different from our world and is effective as art because that allows us to focus on the characters and how we see ourselves in them. So if Valerian is unlikely to be an origin story and unlikely to be placed at a point of crisis that might change how the world works, what do we have left?
When you're adapting a long-running property, you can choose to use tone as a guide.
Look at Spider-Man. We're going on the third reboot of the franchise in the 21st century alone. Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002 is not only a landmark in filmmaking, but it has a clear tone to it. This is a Silver Age Spider-Man transposed into a turn-of-the-century setting. Quick cuts, silly jokes, whooshing sound effects, and other vaguely cartoony elements establish that this is the Spider-Man of the 60s and early 70s. As the movies went on, however, they took on a more serious tone which mirrored the weight of responsibility Peter is having to shoulder. Moreover, it mirrored the move toward the Bronze Age. Fast forward to Amazing Spider-Man. Suddenly you have genetic engineering and corporate intrigue as a fundamental part of the story. Peter's parents being spies is instrumental to what's going on. Peter himself is prone to brooding, and the villains move in slower, more grounded ways. This is clearly a Bronze and Dark Age story culminating with the death of Gwen Stacy, arguably the most famous Bronze Age book ever published. Peter grows from stupid, smart-mouthed kid to thoughtful adult more considerate of his actions, somebody who fits more accurately in the tone of the end of the film.
Raimi's Spider-Man is about whether Peter wants to be Spider-Man or not.
Not everyone is meant to make a difference, but for me, the choice to live an ordinary life is no longer an option.
Web Spider-Man is about how Peter becomes Spider-Man in a world clearly not built for heroes.
This guy wears a mask like an outlaw. I think he's trying to do something maybe the police can't. Can't?
From what we've seen of Holland's performances in both Spider-Man Homecoming and Civil War, we can kind of get the impression that this franchise is going to be about why Peter is Spider-Man. The tone determines what the characters want and how they go about it.
The primary book that Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets is based on is Ambassador to the Shadows, the sixth book in the series and a major turning point in tone. Up until that point, Valerian and Laureline's adventures have been pretty well contained. Sure, they're traveling all over space and time, but there's no sense of continuity to things. They solve a problem on Zahir, then move on. There's no real consequences to what happens to them on Aflaflul or while investigating the city of Sirt. They're just having carefree adventures, and Valerian's catchphrase, action, always action, is said sincerely at this point.
Ambassador of the Shadows changes all of that, though.
While this clearly isn't the case in the film, the book actually takes Valerian out of the story almost completely, having him captured early and following Laureline as she tries to rescue him. However, the book also introduces elements that will suddenly have meaning to a larger universe. At this point in the books, we are introduced to Point Central, called Alpha in the film, the titular City of a Thousand Planets. Not only do we as readers return here several times, often without the title characters, but we also meet a number of characters who will reappear in the series. Suddenly, the world of Valerian goes from what amounts to a collection of closed rooms to a vast, interconnected universe. The kind of universe that Besson excels at portraying. Moreover, while I won't spoil what happens in the comics, and might happen in the movie, I will say that the end of it introduces an element that shakes Valerian's faith in Galaxity. Instead of being James Bond, who only went rogue that one time but is otherwise fully committed to British interests, he starts to question his loyalty. It's a character arc that takes him through the next 6 comics and adds a new dimension to him. The comic series goes from bouncy space adventures to space adventures that also meditate on whether a given set of actions are right or wrong. It adds a moral component, changing the tone.
More than that, though, since the perspective starts to shift around, we get to see that things happen in the world that are not necessarily related to Valerian and Laureline, but that their actions can have ramifications beyond their immediate surroundings.
Ambassador to the Shadows is the right place to start the story because it has a natural character arc for Valerian, from carefree adventuring hero to more thoughtful hero with a nuanced understanding of his world. The shift in tone also provides a natural arc for the film, allowing Besson to spend part of the movie giving us spectacle and fun, then pushing that aside to raise the stakes for the last part, much like he did in Fifth Element.
Now, this is all speculation, but I'm hoping that Besson's choice of Ambassador of the Shadows for this film indicates that he's willing to use the tonal shift from the comic in order to build Valerian's character arc. And hopefully after this, I've made it clear how not only is that possible, but actually a really good idea.
Either way, enjoy the movie. I can't wait to see it. You'll hear all about it here. Take care.
You're running nearly 20 minutes late.
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun.
I know what you're thinking. How do I help Kara build a state-of-the-art video production kit for advanced crime editing? Well, fear not. You can make that dream come true by donating only $1 or $2 to our Patreon, which will also make you eligible for fabulous prizes! If you can't contribute financially, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and especially sharing with your friends. It costs you nothing and goes a long way toward helping the channel grow, reaching new people who, like you, think that comics are literature. Thank you.